Welcome to the October Friday Live. Friday Live is our FM BetterForms and FileMaker community meetup. We have usually pretty good turnout, and I think we have not a bad turnout today. So thank you, everybody, for coming out. We have a lot of techniques today. We're going to cover a number of techniques for an app that we just built. And we'll go through all of those. A lot of them are FileMaker related things. Some of them are BetterForms related stuff as well. So there's a bit of a balance, so hopefully for everybody. This month, we're going to be talking just about Engage You, which is an upcoming conference. We're going to be looking at a number of techniques. One of them is taking advantage of FileMaker's new on-window transaction script trigger, which is kind of interesting. Gives us some really interesting benefits. AppSync is a technique that we've talked about, or a new feature that's in BetterForms. We'll dive into that and how we can use that. Of course, we have our usual questions and answers and a draw towards the end of today's show. Don't forget, today's meetup is recorded. We usually send out those recordings about a week or two afterwards. We may go a little bit longer with this particular one, just until after the conference. I'm not sure on that. All right. We do want to encourage a interactive community, so please, by all means, chime in and ask questions. Don't just type them in, but feel free to jump on camera and on screen, and audio as well. You can find previous recordings to our Friday Lives through our YouTube channel. That's if you search FM BetterForms, as well as through the Awesome BetterForms page. That's available within the app and also off of our footer of our website. All right, so we have a conference that we're attending, and we try to attend some of the conferences. We were recently at .fmp in Berlin in June, and a few of us from our team, Madalena and Andrew, are going to be joining myself, and we'll be in Antwerp this November, the 12th to the 14th. It's turning out to be a pretty good conference, actually, because they just announced that Clay Mackel and a few other people are going to be there as well. I'm not sure if they're giving any talks. I didn't see them on the schedule, but they might be. Nonetheless, we're going to have a booth there, and we're giving away a bunch of swag and things like that, and doing some demonstrations. We have a couple talks. I'm going to be doing a talk on data synchronization and some techniques in that, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about that stuff today, as well as we'll be doing BetterForms demonstration and then presentation as well. So if you are in Europe and you're coming, please, by all means, come by and say hello to us all, because we're looking forward to that. All right, we're going to dive right into things, and we're really hoping today that we can get a lot of feedback from everybody in our community. We wanted to build an app that kind of is a demo app that's sort of somewhat interactive for conferences, for things like Friday Live and such. And we wanted to make it a simple app that people could sort of understand, but at the same time, we wanted to showcase more advanced features. So there's this kind of a challenge in there to do that. And it's like, how do you create an app that people will want to ideally use and continue to use, or at least use it for maybe 5 or 10 interactions within it as a demo? And that's usually pretty challenging. So we created this app, this demo app, which we'll showcase. And Andrew and I built this, and we just started building it, like, I think about mid last week or so, to be honest with you. So it's only has about 9 days of actual development, maybe about 30 hours or so of effort, roughly person effort has gone into it. So it's pretty young, it's pretty green. And I think it might have a bug or two, as software often does, but we wanted to showcase that. And we also wanted to talk about all the techniques that we're using within that, because we're using some just a bunch of different things within the application. So I think what we'll do is we'll start off, maybe we can demonstrate the app and walk through that. And Andrew, you can kind of just chime in here if I've missed anything. And we'll get your feedback. And then actually we'll have you try it out as well. So just a bit more background, our goal was that when we visit these types of events, live events, virtual presentations and stuff, we wanted something that people can be that's a little bit more tangible, and they can interact with. So I think Pearson's on the call here. Yeah. So Pearson, we kind of presented some ideas to Pearson, and he came up with some ideas, and we kind of met in the middle a little bit, and we ended up. This is where we're at right now. Again, after about 9 days. So basically, we have, excuse me, a landing page. And Pearson, do you want to walk through it, or you want me to walk through it, or do you want to go through your Figma first, maybe, or how do you want to handle that?
I mean, I think the Figma and the app itself are pretty similar. So maybe you take the reins because I'm not super familiar with what might be uh any potential bugs that
Yeah, we've made a bunch of
we're
changes
figuring
even
out.
just since yesterday. So okay, that's fine. Um, okay, so basically the idea is you land on this landing page, and we're not sure what to call this. Maybe you guys can give us some ideas, but we want to make something that's kind of fun. Sort of a interactive challenge. So right now it's just called play challenge, for lack of a better name. We are planning on putting some more related information on the app, down in here. So you'll scroll up and you'll see information on the promotions that we're offering at whatever the event is, and a little bit of background information of what the app is. We figure most people are going to be on devices, so we would access this through a QR code. Which reminds me, Andrew, while I'm speaking, could you deploy the latest changes to the dev version or the production version?
Will do.
Thanks. And so the idea here is we would hit play challenge. Now I've already registered, so it would normally take me through an installation screen, and I'm going to end up skipping that right now, and I'll show you this on a mobile device in just a second. And it jumps us right into an interactive challenge sort of area. The idea here is that we could use this app for a typical inspection type of thing as well. It's because whether you're doing some kind of a thing where you achieve different tiers and win prizes, or you do something like I'm inspecting the first floor of a condominium, it's really kind of the same sort of data structure, the same similar UI. So what we've done here is we've created a couple tiers where people could effectively win some things, right? And we just put some fictitious items in here for now. We'll figure this all out as we get along and get closer. But the idea is that in order to achieve the items that are on this tier, I would complete these tasks. So the first task is something like enter a nickname. And if I jump into here, I could enter a nickname. We'll adjust the width of that's a little later on. And now I've completed that first task, my progress indicator to indicate that the task animated up, and we've completed that now. So I have 1 out of 2 tasks completed, and I would go to tell us your favorite developer coding joke, and we'll make some of these fields dynamic. The app actually has the ability to, which is one of the features we want to show, but right now it's not. We haven't set it up. So you guys have a good knock joke or a good coding joke? Right. How many developers to anybody suggestions? All right. Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that. So I don't have a good joke in here. So we end up here, and now we've gone all the way up to this top level, right? So at that point, we'd probably add something in here that says, hey, you can pick up your prize, or maybe another item the last task on this would be to claim your prize. So that's kind of the general gist of the application. Now, we wanted a little bit more interaction. So that's one interaction. You've done it once, but there's no incentive to kind of play around with the app again. So what we were thinking of doing is we use this, or what we are doing, I should say, is we use this, the data that we've acquired from here, to generate a social feed. And I'll show you what that looks like as well. So I jump over to my feed here, and somebody has already jumped in here already. Somebody must have picked the URL up, our dev URL. Before you do, that's okay though. It's okay. That's kind of funny. But so this is a good example of exactly what we wanted. So here's my stuff, but Jeroen here has beat me to it. So here's kind of a social feed that we've generated. And I noticed that he posted knock knock, who's there, very long pause. And I'll share this link in a second, and we can like that. And one of the things you'll notice when we like that, the number of likes goes up to 1. And if I click on this, and a few seconds later, it'll come up to 1 as well. And how many devs does actually? That's not a really good one. So let me turn that back. And then we have different things. So somebody else has already jumped in here. So before we do that, let's actually give everybody a chance to play around with this. This is the nature or the idea of the app. And let me go back and share. Let me share a URL. Yeah. All right. So if you want to try okay, so here's our first little, I just noticed that. I wonder if that is I changed the size of this just yesterday. There we go. Okay. All right. There's a little bug there. So if you want to take your mobile device and give this a try, and you can scan that, and then sort of it kind of prompts you through what to do. The app is a PWA, or progressive web app, which is one of the things we're going to talk about in more detail today. And that means you can install it, and it'll end up saving to the desktop of your application or your homepage of your device. So give that a try and scan that up there. And in the meantime, I'm going to switch to our production. And right now, currently, as you know, that BetterForms apps can basically connect up to any database. So we're actually having the back end, the FileMaker side, is connecting for the development and the production app are both connected to the same database, which we'll walk through in a second. And I just want to show you what that experience would look like on a mobile device here as well. All right. So the idea being here that I can now take this app and I can actually save it to my homepage of my device. I'm just going to keep that QR code. And here it is down over here. And I can launch that just the same. And there we go. So now I'm in the app and I go and play my challenge. This is a first time I've used it on this since this install, I think. So it's going to prompt me for a few basic informations. Charles, iPhone. Just going to do that so I can identify, because it is a real web app. The auto prompting, the type ahead, of course, works. And there we go. So now we're inside the app. One of the things we wanted to do is we didn't want to burden people with actually having to jump through too many hoops to authenticate them. So what the app does is it actually just IDs that particular device. We don't take a snapshot or a fingerprint of the device. We're just dropping in a UID in the local storage and making that persist, so that every device is effectively its own user. All right. If you don't register, you think you can still jump in here. And let me just do this. And you're welcome to play around there. Okay, so I see some people have already jumped in here, which is pretty cool. We're using a lot of neat techniques here, and I think what we'll do is we'll start off with some new stuff that was available through came from FileMaker, and we'll see how we're integrating that into this particular app. Please do take some pictures and tell us what you think of the challenges. I know it was hard to think of just some stuff that we could use in this Friday Live, but the team would like to sort of get, would really value your feedback there. And Andrew, if you can, or even Pearson, if you can keep an eye on the chat there, if there's anything of value in there that we want to maybe mention.
Looks like a few people had issues connecting, but I think it's been resolved.
So one of the things the app does is it takes advantage of effectively live data. And the way we get this live data is through two or three features sort of combined, two BetterForms features and one in FileMaker that we're taking advantage of. So the first one is kind of the architecture that we've done for the page. We want to be able to have a really, really seamless interaction. And if you notice, there's no lag when I switch between areas of my device here, between switching tabs. And the reason for that is our PWA base code. This is now available in our, it's just getting burned in our latest staging build. So we don't have all of these features totally available, but they will be over the next week or so. But the main idea here is it takes advantage of caching, and it caches all of your forms and your assets and your libraries and things like that. So apps can effectively work offline if you've designed them as such. Progressive web apps are applications that, for all intents, they download everything and they save it on the device. So when you save that app to your home page, you've downloaded all of the BetterForms base code. You've downloaded any third-party libraries. Those are the DOM inserts, things like maybe charting libraries, or we use one in there for generating QR codes. So all of those libraries, they're all get automatically cached and they get saved in the device. Since we have all of that data, we don't have to go back to the BetterForms cloud to fetch any more data when we switch tabs. As long as we're not doing an on-form request, tab switching is instant, right? So you have zero lag, near zero lag between switching to different areas of the app. What that means is, as a native app or as an installed app, now it feels super native. It feels just like everything is sitting on the device, and for all intents and purposes, it is. All right, so let's look at how this works. We use a few different things here. I'm going to start, and this is not exactly probably the ideal order, but I think it'll start to make more sense as we get further along. I want to jump over to FileMaker here, and I actually have to switch my machines because, unfortunately, my computer, unlike everybody else's, is really old, and I don't have modern FileMaker on it. So I'm just going to jump to my laptop here, and I'm going to share my laptop screen. Has anybody taken advantage of, there's my calendar. I'll make sure we edit that out. Has anybody taken advantage of FileMaker's new on-window transaction script trigger? I'll take that as a no. All right. So there's probably lots of people who've done FileMaker meetup groups and talking about this. So I'll talk about it from a little bit different perspective, hopefully. Basically, FileMaker's introduced this new thing called, it's found under File Options, Script Triggers, and right down here, it says on-window transaction. And basically what it does is it fires off a script when any CRUD type operation has happened on your database in all tables. So if you've added a record, deleted a record, updated a record, it will fire off a script, and it runs this script. And to get the context of what changed, it by default doesn't really pass much information, but it has FileMaker Claris was smart enough to add the ability. FileMaker was smart enough to add the ability to make it dynamic enough that you can pass information in. So basically what happens is, and whenever anything changes in my app, it's going to run this script, and we call the script on window transaction. When it runs that script, it's passing some information into the script. It's passing in some information based on the table, the file, because you can have a commit from a related file, right? Multi-file solution, and you're in the, say, the business file or one part of file A, and the commit happened in a script in file A, but in the other file, in the other script. So it passes in the file, it passes in the table, and it passes in the action, and a bit of other metadata in there. I think UID or the FileMaker ID as well for that. And then you have the ability to pass in some extra information. The extra information is determined by, I'm just going to jump into a field here. Here's a field called or a table called events. And if we just look at this, here's my events table. This is the events table for that app that we're using right now. And it just has, the event name and it is active. And let me use not an events one. Let me use a different one here. We'll use the tasks one here. Okay. And in here, just a second here. I thought we had this field added in. Just a quick sec. Sorry, I thought I had the field added into these here on window transaction. I'm just going to look for a table that I have. I could have sworn we added it into all of the tables, but we may not have. Okay, here's one. All right. So the data that gets passed in comes from this field here called on window transaction. And basically anything you put into this field, into this calculation, will get evaluated at the time that script trigger or just before that script runs. And there are some caveats in terms of the context of what it can see. It doesn't see stuff like the rest of the script trigger world or the rest of the FileMaker coding environment. It actually seems to be running in its own little thread somehow. But you can still manage to pass some data in. And what we did is we kind of augmented this in two ways. We wanted something that's really, really flexible. And in the database world, you have this concept called broadcasting. Broadcasting is when you send out to the other devices that are connected to the database. You send out information about the CRUD actions, to create, update, read, and deletes, and anything else. Basically, they're external triggers or hooks that come out of the database when something happens in the database. FileMaker does that natively between FileMaker server and FileMaker client, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't have generic broadcasting where you can send a signal out or send some information out to a third-party tool like BetterForms. So up until now, we've always kind of handled that by not worrying too much about stateful data, because most of the time you don't really need that. You don't need to have your data totally 100% live, because there's chances are there's not somebody else changing it while you're editing it at the same time. But with this new Windows script trigger, we can actually get or emulate broadcasting or database broadcasting. So what's happening in this function here is we're basically passing some information. And first of all, this is kind of a trick that we have to do to get this thing to update properly. But we basically have a script trigger that's based on the modification timestamp, so that'll cause this calculation to evaluate at the time the record is committed. And then we're calling a custom function with some parameters. I'm going to talk about the custom function in a second. And the reason this is wrapped in an evaluate is this allows us to cut and paste this piece of code into any application without having breaking script references. Right, so it allows it to be more transportable. That's the main reason there. And then that means that we can also take this piece of code and we can wrap this into a plugin, FileMaker plugin too. So we're basically passing. Pardon me.
Sorry, it's an add-on.
Add-on. Sorry, you're right. And I'm actually stepping on Eduardo's toes here because he's the one who actually built this add-on here. We coded some of the stuff together, but he's done most of the work. So basically, we're passing some information here, and this information here allows us to have a little bit of context about what we want. We also do one other thing here, is we're calling a custom function, and we'll make this available in our helper or in a support file, so you can kind of hack it up to whatever your own liking is. But the custom function is a little bit more complex here, and let me jump to it. Let's see, where are we here? If only we could search these. Just trying to find. There it is. Okay, so this is a kind of a big this is a bit of a monster of a thing. I'm not going to go over the details here, but I'll tell you why it's so big. Basically, what the purpose of this custom function is it prepares some data, and it does it in a little bit more advanced way. It prepares the data in such a way that it has some extra timestamp information for data resolution. We're using this in a synchronization technique, which I talked about in a prior Friday Live. And it's also grabbing some other bits of information about, basically it's determining what data changed, and it's also filtering out the data, because I don't generally want, if I have a really wide table, it's got 100 fields, I don't want to send out 100 fields of data to the web or to any other device. I really only want to send the deltas, the data that changed. So this custom function basically looks at the table and it says, this is the piece of information, or the record. This is the piece of information that changed. And then when it changed, it is looking up on a table and saying, should I even transmit this information? Maybe it's a social security number. I'm not supposed to send that out absolutely at all, or some kind of special key, or maybe it's just a nickname and I can totally always send that out. So it basically goes through, and you can take this apart again. We'll make it available. It goes through and it produces this edit object, this object of what's happened in my database when that script trigger ran. Right now, what that means is, if I know, and this is a little tricky one, but if I know that a given record with a given ID has changed in my database, I don't really care what table it is. Okay, so I can still actually use that information. In other words, if the ID is universally unique and that data changed, not created, but changed somehow, like I've changed the quantity here for the swag, and I don't really care what table that came from, I can still use that. So the reason we can still use that is because it's universally unique. So that means I've got this ID 001. I don't care where else in the universe it sits. If something else in my system has an ID of 001 and the first name changed from Charles to Fred, I can safely change that on the other side. Okay, I don't know if that makes sense at all. So there's a kind of a trickier concept. So if I have a globally unique ID, and actually, is anybody, it's a very similar concept here. Has anybody ever done this, a universal deleter, this kind of concept here, where you want to delete a bunch of records and you have just the IDs? So you create a record on the left side. I create a record over here. I put a list of all of the IDs in across any table, and then I delete that record. And then through the relationship, the allowed delete is enabled, and that deletes the right-hand side. If you've ever used any technique like that, so it's basically centralized deleting or programmatic deleting, this is a very similar concept. As long as you know what universally unique ID here is, you don't really care what table it is. And the same thing goes for broadcasting your data. If you know what the ID is and it's universally unique, it doesn't matter where that data sits in any other system, it needs to be updated, as long as the IDs match. Okay, so that's the fundamental premise of how this works. That can be used where you'd want to use this kind of concept is if you're, I know a lot of people end up doing things like we have a SQL database and they have a FileMaker database. I don't know why they have a SQL database, I can argue that one. But they have some kind of separate database, and then they're pushing information. This is the sort of same concept. You can use this to, if you have something that has to be very performant and small amounts of data, instead of pushing the whole record, now you're only pushing the pieces of data that changed. So to give you an idea of how that custom function works, I think I have a script trigger in here. Window. There we go. So what's going to happen is, let me just, my Mac is heating up here. What's going to happen is when I edit something, let me just put a breakpoint in here. When I edit something over on here and I go to 16, as soon as I commit the record, let me just make sure I got the dev tools open here. There. I'm gonna cause this script trigger to run. There. Okay. So what's happened is I've edited this record in the back. I edited my quantity remaining, and this ran a script over here. The script doesn't have too much in it because you may have a lot of things hanging off your on-window transaction, right? Sometimes this is just kind of a concept of coding, is instead of just putting all of the core gist of what you need to do in a top layer script, we put it in one script down so that we can hang other things off of here in the future. So this is going to basically run this script. And if we actually look at what the what got passed in, it's $params here. I'm just going to do it this way here. Actually, we'll do it here. This is the information that got passed in from me making that edit. So you can see here, and this is, most of this comes from the on-window transaction, and some of this data comes from our custom function. So the stuff that comes from the on-window transaction is the file, the table, the FileMaker internal ID of the record that got modified, and the action that the verb that happened, it was modified. This other information in here, the web sync information, is information we added, because FileMaker doesn't add enough information on its own, but it gave us enough ability to add our own stuff. So we add a couple things. We add some concepts of context. I'll talk about that in a second. We add a timestamp object, which tells me the exact time that field was modified. That allows me to do very, very advanced synchronization later on with other systems, but we're not using this in this example here. It gives me the field and the new value. It's quantity and it's 18. So this information, we're really with just this ID and this quantity. That is really all I need to send out to any type of BetterForms or any app for that matter, to get some live updating. So I'm just going to jump out. Does anybody have any questions about on-window transactions so far? Is it kind of getting too deep or too much in the weeds?
I think Alessandro had a question. Alessandro, did you want to let us know about your thoughts?
No, but it's not related to this function, but it's very interesting, the function to delete function that Charles showed. And I ask if it's possible also to have a similar function to duplicate a bunch of record.
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, let me just jump back into that, because so this is like a universal deleter. We usually code our apps in this kind of style. It keeps the apps, because we don't generally build any UI in FileMaker, it keeps the apps super lean, right? This is our entire Connect app, the entire demo app that we posted, and maybe Andrew can post the link in there to in the chat as well. And if you wanted to duplicate a record, duplicate's a little bit different, because you could be duplicating an invoice which has a lot of dependencies. You know, it has addresses and contacts and line items and products and so on. So there's a little bit more involved in that. But if you want to read a record and at the same time write or create something else out, you can use something like this selector type mechanism. The easiest way to do that using this kind of an architecture is to get a JSON object of your entire record, and then you just write the universal CRUD changing the ID, the primary ID, and then you created it. You've effectively duplicated it. So,
And is more quick than parsing, correct?
do you need really speed? I'm going to be like to push back on that. You're duplicating a record. That's a human action. Do you really need, like, whether it takes 50 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds or 2 milliseconds doesn't make any difference unless you're in a big system. I'm not sure if the speed is really a factor, but if you do have something where you got to duplicate a lot, that comes down to, fine coding something and figuring out what technique works best for that situation.
Technically, I need to create a version 2, version 3 of an estimate with 100 line, something like this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that is something that if let's say it's 1,000 lines and you're creating 1,000 records, there's a lot of people who have done lots of research on what the fastest way is doing that is. I don't really know unless it's a very unique situation if it matters, to be quite honest with you. So I'm not sure. I couldn't answer that one. All right, so just going back, so that's kind of how window transactions working. That's how we're using on window transaction by I modify something the minute I commit it, it runs runs a script. I pass in all that extra metadata, which we looked at. And then we're doing one other thing here. We're actually taking that data and we're basically using the next feature of BetterForms is we're sending a message. BetterForms has a messaging API. We have some Friday lives on that. And in here, because the user may have committed multiple records at a time, we have to handle that. That's the only reason why there's a few loops in here. But they might have committed 2 or 3 records. They might have changed things across different tables. We have to handle all of those at the same time. So at the end of the day, after we sort of sort through that data that FileMaker gave back, we're making a call here and we're calling a script called broadcast channel. And we're actually doing it to our dev and production because we're sharing the same database. So we're sending out 2 messages to the BetterForms network and we are sending that parcel of information out. Right now, again, it's just an ID and it's a key that changed. That's it. That's the minimal amount of information that we need. And that's enough to take some data anywhere in your app and update it. And let me just jump back to my app. I'm just going to switch pages here.
Charles, we had a few questions about whether or not this this file will be available for people to reference.
Yeah, I don't see why not. We'll probably make a bunch of little changes to it, so it probably won't be for at least 2 weeks. I would say 3 weeks, let's say, something like that, just as an example file. I don't think we'll bother putting this into our example files because there's a little bit of there's not really that much customization. We possibly could put it in the example file as well. One of the problems we've run into when you create an example file and you have all this stuff in it, it starts to become complex as to what you really need and what you don't need, for example. So this file doesn't have some things, but it has other things and vice versa. So. All right, I'm going to stop my share here for just a second. I'm going to jump back to my other machine here quick. So that's kind of how the window transaction works. But let's look at the app and just talk about a little bit of the data here. And then we're going to go and look at some of the techniques that actually I do need to use the dev version here.
We actually had a few questions that popped up in the feed if you wanted to take a look at those.
Yeah, go for it.
We had one from David who asks how you made to create the shortcut, which I think, how do we get, I guess, a shortcut onto people's devices?
Right. Okay. So the shortcut is really just an iOS or Android thing where you're saving it to home page. We don't actually create any shortcuts there. What the base code or the code BetterForms does is it structures the web app in such a way that the device says, oh, this thing is installable, and it installs. Now we could have on Android, you can have a window that pops up that says, please install. Incidentally, you can install these apps to your homepage too. Like here is my app here. If I click install, fun social thing, install, it'll actually install the app and kaboom, I have a native app. And if I go into my tools, there it is here. It just installed that. So that's Chrome will do that and create a web app. And I launched that and there's my app. So if you ever wanted a use case, we don't really talk about this too much because, to be honest with you, the browser is so common that you always have, every user has a browser open, and it's way easier to just have the browser open than have this app here open. But you can definitely do that. You can uninstall it just the same. I don't want to clear the data there. So, all right. So, yeah.
Yeah, we had another question from Daniel who asked, is your system compatible with FM Server 14?
FileMaker Server 14?
Yes.
No, it also doesn't use Steam. That was a joke. Yeah, no, that's unfortunately no. And the reason for that is we can almost 16 you theoretically can. 17 is the main version. The reason for that is FileMaker introduced JSON, and it's so hard to work with stuff without JSON. You can use some custom functions. We've got some amazing custom functions that were written at the time, but no. Just update your system. You're getting so many more the performance benefits and stuff, and spend $1,000 once or whatever it is, and just do that, in my opinion. All right, I want to look at under the hood here about the data and talk about a little bit more about this concept, because I think it's a really interesting concept about synchronizing data. And it's something that you can use once you really grasp the concept. You can use it in any kind of system that you're building, nothing to do with BetterForms specifically. So I'm going to look underneath here, and we're going to look. And BetterForms has two types of data. It has model data, which is the page data, and it has app, which is like global data. So if I look at this global data in here, and we have these are tasks, and we have swag. So we have a key called swag, or an array called swag. And there's two swag items, and we have a bunch of task items. So this is, you think of this as like if I connected to an API and downloaded a list, this is exactly what I'd get here, something along this line here. So this tier 1 and tier 2 are the two items that are in here, and the data that we have in our tasks is right here. So each task has a unique ID. Right? Everything has a unique ID. My swag has a unique ID. The person has a unique ID. Everything has unique IDs. And this is the fundamental important part here to get. When I go and make a change in my database over here, I'm having FileMaker call BetterForms Cloud through an insert from URL, and just basically do a simple post with an API key that you can find the API key in your app. It's located in right under here. You can say copy API key. And you send a message to the cloud, and you say, hey, can you please update this collection of devices that are connected at this point in time? Can you send a message to them? The message that we can send can be anything. It can be data. It can be instructions. In other words, like script steps, or it can be the data. In our case, for this live updating stuff, we're sending the data, but we don't need to send all of this. We really only, if something changed in here, we really only need to send that information there, something really, really small, just a small object like so. And what BetterForms, we wrote some code. Andrew and Christina, I think Christina joined us in the call somewhere. I thought I seen her come in. So hey, Christina. They wrote some pretty nifty code that basically takes this ID and it effectively looks through the entire data, the entire memory of your app, and it updates the data accordingly. And you can safely do that because the data only exists in the quantity only exists for that particular ID. So that's the fundamental concept of this live updating stuff. So what it means is, you see, I got 19 left over here. And if I jump over to my app on my other device, if I jump over to my app and I change that number and I go, let's say 20. And I just change it on my device and it changes live over here. I can't, unfortunately, demonstrate with this app over here, but the problem is this is FileMaker 18 or something like that, because this particular machine's a little older. So that's kind of how the live data works. We're using one other technique as well in the app, is we're sending out data updates. But what happens if you're not on the page, right? So normally you have this feed over here, and hey Vince. So we have this feed, and in that feed, it's constantly changing, right? People are adding likes, people are doing different things. So how do you keep that up to date when you're not on that particular page, right? Traditional sort of BetterForms coding, you kind of get to the page, you do a request to the server, you say, give me the data for that. And that's good enough for 95% of the apps. But for an app like this, where you need something a little bit more interactive, it's not good. So what we do is we do another technique, which is taking advantage of a really neat feature that Christina built called app sync. And here is how it works. Let me just look at this again here. 2 levels of data. You can think of this as global data. This is global throughout your whole app. These are like FileMaker's $$ variables. And then you can think of the model like a local variable, local to the page. So this is local to the page, single dollar variable, and this is $$ variable. Well, what if when you're running a script, this is kind of going to FileMaker talk, you could, while you're running that script, access all the global variables as if they were $ variables. In other words, what if you could connect those 2 variables together? That means that if I have global data, which is my feed and my tasks and my username and all that stuff, and I want to still remember it so I don't have to go back to the server every time to fetch it, or I don't want to have to use it to wait, more importantly, to fetch it. I still want to remember that data. What if I could just store it, and then if it updates, it's great. And then when I'm ready to use it, I just grab it locally, right? So that's what we call app sync. And this is a new feature that's that we've built in, and we've just, I would say, I think pretty much most of the bugs are all kind of worked out. I know a number of people are using it, but let me have a look at that. So we go to our social feed page here, and I'm going to jump to our data model for our feed. So, and let's just turn off that for a second. So in my data model here, I have a key called tasks, and I also have a key called content. Content are the things that are in this feed in here. These are, each one of these is a content. And what I've done here is I've enabled this sync with app. And this is a relatively new feature that is pretty much ready now for prime time. And basically the way it works is when data changes on my page, it'll also save that data in the global model and vice versa. So my page suddenly is connected into my global area. All right, over on my global side, let's just jump over to that quick. I also have the same key called my content. So this is like $$ my content, and the other one's $ my content in FileMaker Talk. I have one other key, one other thing selected here, which is cache in browser. Cache in browser will save this data to local storage. That means that even if I close the app or I refresh, the data will persist. That means that I don't need to fetch it from FileMaker every time live. I only need to fetch either the updates or fetch it periodically, maybe when I first go to the screen or when the app first loads up, that type of thing. So we're using a combination of those 2 techniques. So the first technique was window transaction, sends a message. The second thing is the messaging system. We receive the message in our app. And then the last one is we update, or the third one is we update the data, or at least only the one piece of data when it changed. And then we remember that or persist that data by turning on this check mark. So there's a few things kind of going on there, but the performance is pretty cool. Like if you guys could open up, if you have the app open, I wouldn't mind trying this out, doing a little bit of a stress test because we haven't really had enough people yet. We're going to scroll down to Vince's picture here, if you could, and I want you to like it. And I want to see other people like it as well. There we go. Let's see if we can get the likes up. Don't unclick them though. Just click them up. Go up first. See how many likes we get. All right. If you don't have this app, you can go to Connect. This says Connect Dev, but just go to connect.fmbetterforms.com. So you can see the likes changing live, right? And I think that's pretty neat. And you can, if you want to like kind of see what you can do, I'm just going to click on up and we'll just like, this is creating hooks each time to do this, but the hooks are running relatively asynchronously. So you'll see it jitter a little bit as different people do that, and it stays up in real time. So I think that's pretty cool. Somebody like this one. I'll like it too. Anybody have any questions about that stuff so far? Is that kind of too much in the weeds again? Okay, what we'll do is I'm just going to jump to the next item. We talked about on-window transaction. We talked about app sync. There's a few other really cool things. There's a progress bar that's in here. And I'm going to let Andrew explain basically how that works because he's the one who built it. So, and do you want to jump to your screen or do you want to keep my screen, Andrew?
You can keep it on your screen.
Okay.
We can pair on this. Right. So the progress bar was interesting. It's not a technique that we just developed, but it's something that we have as an example, currently available in our examples and demos. We've just tweaked it a bit so it works for this application in particular. Char, do you want to go to the actual code of the progress bar? What the progress bar is doing is it's doing a calculation on the width. So basically we have the tasks that you've completed divided by the tasks that are left to complete. The problem is that all these tasks are in kind of one array, but they need to be separated into kind of two tiers. So you have 2 tasks in tier 1 and 2 tasks in tier 2. So what we've done is we've did a few Lodash calculations inside of the actual width calculation, so we can get that perfect division and percentage. I think it's in one of those divs that you have collapsed. Probably the bottom one.
Quantity remaining.
20.
There we go.
Yeah, there it is. All right. So you see around line, I think 24. That's kind of the bar for the actual progress bar. The top div you'll see there is the parent div. So that's kind of the light blue container for the progress bar. And then on line 26 is you'll see the actual code for the dark blue progress that fills up that space there. And inside there, we have a calculated style, which is essentially doing a calculation on the width to see how much space in that progress bar should this darker blue bar take up. And the nice thing about this is we're also running an animation on it. So you'll see in the classes, we have a transition all duration 2000 milliseconds. That's an arbitrary value because we wanted it to be a bit longer so you can kind of see the progress bar fill up and fill down. By default, I think duration 1000 is the largest Tailwind really has, but you can set any number of seconds in there and it will work. So that's mostly it. So basically when the style changes or when the width changes, you'll see the animation of the progress bar kind of go up and down.
Is it going by is completed or what is the
It's going by yes, it's completed in the my task, but I don't have my task available.
Oh, right. I don't have my task.
Model. Yeah. But okay. what you can do to demonstrate that is back in the HTML, you can just change that times 100 and just make that a bit less. That will change the percentage. Yeah, there you go. So you'll see the animation kind of grows and shrinks based off the width size and the width calculation of the my content and then the content or the task left to finish up. But this is a bit more complex of an implementation. A very basic implementation we have in BetterForms in our examples and demos just uses a message from FileMaker and some kind of progress number from 0 to 100. That's much easier to implement than the logic we're using here. But yeah, the progress bar does look pretty cool. And whenever you finish a task, you'll see on the main screen, it just pops up like that. And it has this very native app feel to it. And I think it looks pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah, there is don't let this intimidate you by any means. It's only because we did the coding here. Normally we wouldn't bother. We would just do this in FileMaker and let FileMaker calculate that percentage as a number, as Andrew mentioned. And then that gets rid of all of this. And basically the width is just based on a percentage of how wide it is. I think there is, you did a couple other things in here too. You can't see it on this page, but in the actual app, there's a few things. There's some stuff that changes, like there's rounded corners here, and the app has a maximum width because it looks really funny if you go really wide. And we didn't want to make a totally new desktop layout because we wanted to keep it kind of Twitter-ish. So when I come into my smaller screens, there's no more margin on the side, and that allows us to maximize the room. One of the things we found is on smaller devices, I was fine on my phone, but on somebody else's phone, they said, well, all of this stuff is wrapping. It's like way too small in the middle. So that's something that you can play around with, and it basically you can turn stuff like that on and off. And there's just little touches. There's lots more little touches I think to do in the app. But as I said, we've probably got, I don't know, maybe 30, 35 hours probably of functional hours into building it. So it's not really that much. It's really nothing. All right. Does anybody have any questions about the progress bar that Andrew just went through? All right, we talked about window transition, positive messaging, model updates, temporary literals. Oh, this is interesting here. Okay, there's something else we wanted to do here too, and this is something you can do in any. A number of people already do this, but we wanted, and we haven't finished totally building this section out, but it says enter nickname, and we jump into here and we enter some kind of information. But we wanted to be able to change this, and right now it's only showing like an input field. So, well, how do we change it to handle different types of questions? I may have radio buttons. I may have input, text area, all these different kinds of fields. And I don't know what for a given event or a given inspection, if this was an inspection app and a given checklist, I don't know what's going to be in there, right? So I can't hard code this stuff in. Right, we have to make it totally dynamic. Now we can. There's a lot of different ways of making something dynamic. There's one way, and we do this in FileMaker all the time with a hidden calc, and you have two buttons that are superimposed on each other, and you hide one and you show the other one, and then it becomes dynamic, or two different areas of stuff, right? So that's one way. It's not super scalable though, because that means you still have to change the guts of the program. You have to go into layout mode if you're doing that in FileMaker and actually change the layout if somebody wanted a new type of button. So how do you make this totally dynamic? So I want to show you how we started to code this and where it's going here. So this is our task detail page. All right. So if we look at this page, there's a header area, there's a body, and there's a button. Right, so we can see we have a button footer right here. We have a header area, and then we have this middle section area, and these are just elements. So here with this element here, this is an input, and this is a group of elements here. And if I was to look at this one here, this is my input field. So this is an example of a hard-coded field. Basically, this field shows up when the type is input. If we go over to FileMaker here and we look at our tasks, these are our tasks that would belong to, and mind our FileMaker utility layout here. It's just kind of put on here. We have where's the type? Type is in here somewhere. I don't see type. And oh, it is there. There it is. Now I can find it, of course. All right. So type is right here. So we have this type as input, and this is a type of photo, and this is another value of input, and so on. So this would sort of determine what that particular task is and how it renders. So we're just checking that type key, and we're saying we're adding a calculation onto our visible key. And we're saying if the active task, that's the one that the person has selected, is equal to type, then we show this element, right? If we have active task equal type of photo, we show this element. So that's one way of doing that, right? Basically switching on and off, exactly the same as you normally do in FileMaker, right? If you're having conditional things that show visibility of two different overlaying elements. Here's another way of doing this as well. And let me see if I can find this in here. Is this one here. So this one here is a lot more flexible. What it's doing is it's basically saying if app.activeTask, again, this is the task that we've selected. This, if there's some schema, then I'm going to use that schema for my fields. Right? So if there's schema, I'm going to use that schema for my fields. Right? Fields, remember, are the things that display. Those are the fields there. So that means that this is effectively schema. What that means is I can go over to my tasks. And do we have a task that has custom here? Here's one here.
You might have to change that event to the other one.
Pardon me?
Copy the event ID from the Friday Live one into that one. Just so it shows up in the.
Is it this one here?
Yeah, that one's the Friday Live one.
Right. Okay. Sorry. We just have it in a different event here. And maybe Soeb, if you're on, if you could make the backgrounds black so we could see these.
Sure.
You can do it right now too. That's the cool thing about FileMaker is you can just do this stuff live, right? Gotta love that. All right. So check out what we did here. So what we've done is we've taken the schema, which can be any BetterForms content. Now this can go as deep as you want now, right? Because it's fully dynamic. And we're saying for this particular custom one here, this one here, use this schema. And this particular one is a text area. And it just has, placeholder and some different things like that. And what happens is when the app loads, and let me just see if I let me go back to tasks here.
If you go back to the home screen, you'll reload the tasks.
Yeah. We don't bother downloading, grabbing the tasks all the time here. There it is here. Which one was it?
Second one.
All right. Ask the BF team a question. So when I jump to this page, if you look, this area has changed now. All right. So this area is not defined by BetterForms. It's defined by FileMaker. So that means FileMaker, and this is one of the reasons why underneath the hood BetterForms is data oriented, right? So you can see that the placeholder has some X's. So if I was to jump into here and get rid of these X's, and I could build a UI in here if I really wanted to, but as a developer, it's not necessary, right? And let's just jump back again. And let's jump into that one. And there you go. We've changed that now. So the takeaway here is that we've created totally dynamic interface. That means you can put anything you want inside this space, right? It can be HTML, it could be a card, it can be anything you want, right? Now,
Can I just ask a quick question on that?
Yeah, please.
So if you'd got the window transaction set up on that table, that would automatically update the interface live without the person moving from home and back to tasks, would it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because this underneath the hood, if we looked under here for this active task, or look at the page here, we have this task data, and you can actually see schema key right here. Hold on. Yeah, you can see the actual schema key right here. That is the BetterForms element right there. So if we were to update the information on here, I can't do it on this. I think this should broadcast, but when I edited it on here, this is an old version of FileMaker, right? So this is, I'm just using FileMaker 19 until I have to absolutely forced to update my computer here. But on my laptop, I have 20, which is what's needed for window transactions. Our server is 20, but just my particular device isn't. So it's not updating a lot in real time, but otherwise it would. All right. I should be able to actually probably emulate that. Let me just see here, because I think I haven't tried this, but let me just try this now quick. And just find, where is the schema? Here it is. Take a nice scene. Is that it? No, I'm just looking for this particular one. And let's see if I can, there it is there. And if I change the number of rows to 10 rows, let's see if that works proper. I might be, oh, you know what? I'm probably not including this field in my broadcast list. One of the things, I didn't really get into the weeds too much, but one of the things in that when we're using that broadcast technique is we've created a field here, and I'll just show you here quick. We've created a field here, and basically what it is a list of the fields that I'm interested in broadcasting, so I don't accidentally broadcast. I mean, security, you got to always be thinking about that, right? When we're dealing with like BetterForms apps and like FileMaker apps, we're generally dealing with the general public. So we have to be a little bit more security conscientious that we don't let any bad data come out of the system. So this is basically saying that in a given table, in a content likes, let me find my tasks table. So I must have passed it here, did I? Actually, I don't even see it in here. Task. I thought we had one. Okay, so we're not actually broadcasting anything from the tasks table, but we could easily add that in there. And we would add the keys here that I want to send, and these are the only ones that would actually get sent out the door. So it's kind of, this is kind of acting as a marshal saying, nope, we can't send anything out. Alessandro, you had a question?
Yes, so technically you are using the get column custom function that you are built in BetterForm. You're using the same techniques, but in BetterForm you need to send the full JSON, and this is the BetterForm that make what the custom function do in FileMaker, correct?
Two halves. What the app does when I visit this page, actually, I think it's only loading the tasks when we hit the home page here. But what the app is, because the tasks don't change that much, what it's doing is it's doing a get column as array, and it's finding all of the tasks where the active event, because we made this for multiple events, so we have an event, and there's where the active event is one. So we find all the tasks that belong to that event. Tasks, where are here? And so that's only going to be, a few of these. Like, let's say it's doing this. It's basically finding all of these, and it's only going to find those few tasks, right? Once it finds those tasks, then it's building that as a JSON object. When the data changes, the second half, when the data changes, we're actually just looking for the changed piece of information and sending that, or sending that as a message. So it's slightly different. All right, just going back to this dynamic method, because I think there's a lot of potential for you're building an inspection app and so on here. I made this a little pretty big. We did a couple other things too. So you can grab this data dynamically and put anything you want in here. And what's kind of neat is the data can have like calculations. It can be HTML with really rich content, so it can show pictures, anything you want really now, because we're making it portable, and you'd have to build that little widget. But once you have it, all your customers, your clients, or your users, for every event or every list of inspections, if it's an inspection app. Yeah, maybe white would be a better color for this one here. I think, maybe not. I don't know. It just looks kind of weird. We're grabbing that data, and everything's fully dynamic. Now, there's a second half of this. It's like, well, if you're having dynamic UI, how do you record the data? Because normally first name field goes in a first name field in FileMaker, and the last name goes in the last name in FileMaker. So how do you record that data? So that's the next sort of, not challenge, but that's the next thing here. So if you're building these kind of dynamic data systems, we call it content. That's the answers, if you will, from when you ask those questions. And if I jump into here, we're actually taking the data from here, and we're not normalizing it. So we're not taking it and putting it into first name and last name, because we don't know what those questions are going to be, and we don't have fields in the database for them. And there's no reason to for our use case. So instead, what we're doing is we're taking the data and storing it in a data field. So if I look at this one here, why did the two Java methods get a divorce? Because they have constant arguments. All right, and I think you could riff off a whole bunch of jokes in there. All right. So if we look at this data, this is the data that we actually stored. There was a key called input, and it says why did to data, blah, blah, blah. Right. So that's how we're storing the data. And what that means is for something like my dynamic one, if I go in here, I could have multiple keys. So let's go to that dynamic one that I had earlier. Tasks, was it? Yeah, tasks. And it was this guy. No, what was the third one? I think. No, it is this one. Text area. Yeah, it is. Okay. I could have, if I wanted to have two text areas, I'm just going to take this and edit this JSON really quick here. So just so you can see. So if I wanted to have two text areas, or maybe I wanted to add I wanted to add something like an input field ahead of this. So I wanted, like give me the subject of your, there we go. Okay. So now I have two keys and subject. If I wanted to do something like this, so this is why we want to make this stuff dynamic and subject. So this particular question was ask Friday Live team a question, something like that. So now what I've done is I've changed this. So this one's an input, and that one, does that look right, Andrew? Content.subject.
Data dot.
Oh yeah, we changed it, right? Data. Did we change it?
I
don't think we did yet.
I think it's content dot data. Let me double check what I have it on the task detail page. We did change it recently.
Yeah, sorry, we just changed some of the naming convention in this.
Yes, content.data. Whatever key.
Right, so now I'm going to put this in here. Okay, let's see if this works proper. And we jump back over here. We'll fetch that. That'll update that. Did I? Oh, BF team a question. Okay, so I might be doing something off, but anyhow, it's can fetch the data totally. Did I commit this record too? I should also make sure I did. It'll totally
fetch the new list.
You're not on the custom record, I believe.
You put it in the photo.
It's a photo record.
Thanks. You guys didn't. You just waited and watched that the whole time. Didn't say a word. So yeah, I'm gonna let him screw up. Is it this one here? It's supposed to go in? Yeah. No, it's not. This one.
No,
I think you've got it.
You've got it
In your own time. Yeah.
Okay, find all. Okay, so it's somewhere like this one, maybe. Ask the BFT. Okay, there we go. All right. So does that make sense what I'm doing here so far? So we got two objects, so hopefully it works. So before I even ask that, so let's try this again. BF team a question. Okay, I might have something.
You've got double square brackets.
And you saw that too, didn't you? Thank you, sir. Okay. Let's try this again. Hey, all right. So now I've just added two fields in here. Okay. So we got, something, subject, and then the thing, and then we submit. So we've dynamically, without changing the UI, imagine this again, imagine a condominium inspection app. Everybody's got a client that does those, right? Some kind of a checklist app, and that you want to give the end user, the super user of FileMaker access to be able to create these dynamic lists. Now they can do that, and this data will automatically get pushed into the keys that I specified. In this case, it's a subject key and a description key. So let's try this out. So subject is messaging, and where can I learn more? Something like this. And let's hopefully that works. Now, so now we've created this dynamic thing in here. And I'm not sure if there might be some other world. Let's see. Let's just check here. Tasks. Okay. So now I have the data here. Here's the data that we recorded because we're not done yet. here's the data recorded. Well, if you have a dynamic interface, that means you have to also dynamically display your data. So I did acquire the data properly, right? But I need to now show that data in such a fashion that looks good to my feed. And right now my feed, it says hello world. So that's not exactly the what I want to do. So what we did is we came up with this, I think it was like yesterday or the day before. And it's a concept of using template literals. If you've used template literals in JavaScript, they're basically merge tags. In FileMaker, if you go into layout mode and you put angle brace, and you can put some, field, table, : field, and you can have these merge tags. So if I wanted to say something like subject, and now I want to define what that subject is, I can use this reference. So I would say item.data. Subject, I think I called it there. And I'm going to just put a BR in here. Actually, we actually made it so that it supports Markdown, so I can put a couple spaces, and then I could say the question question is, and what would be my question? I'm going to copy this. Let's see if this works. Question, and what is the other key? Man, these are really small rows. Subject, description. Okay, call it description. Sorry for operating so small here. Okay, so what we've done, you can't really see this that well in here. So so what I've done is I've created this data here where this is a merge tag. This data can fully support either Markdown or HTML, and you can try it by putting in the questions, you can put some spaces, and if you're familiar with Markdown language, you can format stuff up. But it also supports HTML as well. So that means you could put tags, images, anything you want, and now we could display our data in any fashion. So I think this looks correct. So let's try it out here. Make sure I'm committed. And oops, let's go back over to here because I made some changes. Grab that again. Ask the BF team a question. Actually, sure. I think I can just go into my feed now. Okay. So here we go. Subject, messaging. So now I've created this format of that exact type of question. So the takeaway again here is that you got the client, and the client says, well, I really want to, when they take a picture of this inspection, how do I want to format that in my feed? I want to, for inspections, we want to say, does this look okay? And, there's a picture of the pipe or something. So now I can format that data exactly as I want. Right? Does that make sense how we've made that totally dynamic?
Absolutely. Love it.
Right? It's a cool use of template literals. All right. Any questions about that, or where you could go with that? Any ideas? Not too many people took full pictures of their setups, so I wonder what's hanging on.
There's a few of them as you come down.
Yeah? I'm going to check them out.
Close to the bottom.
That's cool. What is that thing?
Lego.
There's a phone. So it's kind of neat. What we didn't do, I think where we could go with this, there's somebody's dog sleeping. Where we could go with this is we could fetch maybe the last 100, 200 feeds. The data is relatively light because we're not like passing the images themselves. They're going up to S3, and Andrew will talk about that next. And then we could probably, when you get to the end of that feed, we have something that detects that you're at the end of the list. We run a call to FileMaker and we say, hey, can you give us another, we're at this timestamp, can you give us the next ones from 100 earlier than that? And we can do that, keep doing that, and just adding it onto the array. That's effectively what all these continuous scrolling apps, or infinite scrolling as it's called, does. I don't know if it does scroll up to the top too if you hit this thing. So give it a try. Can you guys just maybe put some fake questions or put some real questions, even better, in here, and we'll see. We should also have this feed update live, and we don't have that at the moment. We didn't bother to add a hook in there for that. I think that would be a good feature to have. All right. All right, so that was template literal. So I'm going to pass it over to Andrew and maybe if you want to use your screen for that, probably better.
Here, I'll take
if you
it
can.
over here.
And then we'll just talk about a couple things for image handling and how we handled that.
Put this over here. Share. Right, so this actually works out pretty well because Alessandro had a question about where we're storing the images. And right now we are using Amazon S3 for all image storage. And the way we get it into the bucket is using UPI. So when we, for example, if you go to one of the photo taking tasks, and actually can't, my webcam doesn't work with different sources, but the idea is if you take the photo here, what it's doing is UPI is going to capture whatever you have in the camera. It's going to ask for a pre-signed URL. And I think this technique is something we've showcased a bit in the past, but I'll explain it briefly here. Here in the task detail page, you can see a lot of named actions. Most of them relate to UPI and the implementation of UPI. This netcam function here is where you see we initialize UPI in all the configurations. In particular, we are using the webcam plugin, which lets us actually put this camera functionality in the task detail. Right around here, you'll see that we're using UPI AWS S3. Unfortunately, in order for this to work, we need some kind of pre-signed URL for it to upload into the bucket. So Charles and Eduardo came up with this really cool named action promise idea. I'm not gonna get into it because I don't fully understand it either. But essentially, the idea is we run this named action get signed URL. It makes a call to FileMaker to generate that pre-signed URL and then resolve it, and this promise returned and then puts it into the bucket. So you'll see in the bucket here, and I'll actually pull it up so you can kind of see here. All of our files are being stored under our example bucket under BF Connect, and you'll see here is a list of all of the images that's been taken so far in our BF Connect application. So that's how we handle the pushing of the images into the bucket. When we fetch the pictures, we also need a signed URL, but in this case, it's going to be a get signed URL, which means you can take this URL here, and actually my dev tools, you'll see, for example, right here, we have all these signed URLs. Let's see if I can copy it and it works. Totally not. There's something with copying in DevTools that never works properly.
You know what?
But
I think it's the highlighting of you're not highlighting the exact stuff. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just gonna cheat here.
And then you have to edit it. Yeah.
Put on a notepad and then get the actual URL. There we go. So yeah, this is the get signed URL that gets returned and generated. There's a picture of me, coincidentally. And how that works is because signed URLs expire, we can't just generate one URL and then save it in the field and then keep using that forever. I think the max expiration date is like a week, Charles. Is that correct?
I think that's the maximum. You can also set the images to never expire as well.
Right.
The bucket, so that they're just regular assets then.
So the way we circumvent the idea of the images or the get signed URLs expiring is we essentially generate a new get signed URL whenever we access the asset. You'll see here in our documents table, we have a field here called signed URL, and this is an actual a calculation field right here that uses the custom function get pre-signed URL, which I think Jason Wood came up with, but we've kind of modified slightly. But essentially just passes a bunch of pref keys and the path to the file, obviously, and generates that pre-signed URL. So whenever you try to access or look at the feed, it'll generate that image and you can fetch it on your browser. So that's the gist of it. We're pushing the file from using UPI to the bucket, and then we fetch it out using the get signed URL. I think we have a few presentations of this technique in the past. So if you want some more information or some more detail on how that works, you can check out those presentations. But honestly, saving the files using the bucket is a lot better. I think we have an application where instead of using Amazon, we actually store it in base64, which is nice because it's local. However, the files themselves can get pretty large, and the images can take up a lot of space and cause some performance issues. So sometimes it's better to just store it in the bucket instead. Yeah, that would be the gist of that.
Yeah, special shout out to Jay. I don't know if Jason's on the call today. He's often here, but he wrote that custom function, and we've done a little bit of contribution, but it's all him, and it's super handy. If you feel intimidated, like, oh, AWS S3, like, it's literally one custom function, as you saw there, to fetch the data, and one custom function with an insert from URL to post the data, and that's it. Actually, you don't have to do any posting because BetterForms takes care of that. But if you're using it purely from FileMaker, we have examples of all of that in our examples file, and the custom functions in there as well. So give it a try, because once you go to AWS, like, or that type of a system for storing files, it's pretty hard to. It gives you so much flexibility that you won't bother, using FileMaker after that. Let's see, sorry here. There was a couple other things. There were some questions I just wanted to kind of jump into here. If you're, I just realized that connect.fm BetterForms, because we're using an experimental base code or a special version before we release it into staging. It's a one-off that we're running that app on. It's not available in Europe. Just use connectdev, connectdev.fmbetterforms.com, and then everything should be fine.
Charles, actually, it should be. I added a rule there.
Super. Oh, great. So Eduardo's already changed it, so you should be able to give that a try. That was for Neil. Get install role by ADP early payroll. I'm not sure what that is. That's interesting. Beverly's got something. Install role by ADP. Is that, if you're still getting that, let us know. Connect that. Oh, okay. Sorry. Got that fixed up. Working from Chrome and Safari have add to home screen, but Brave browser doesn't have that feature. That's interesting. So you're using Brave browser on your device, mobile device, and it doesn't have that feature. You could add feature detection in the devices. So in theory, let's see, how could you solve this? In theory, if you, in your app, you can say, please install this, open this app up in your Safari browser or whatever, and then install it from there. You could do that. In fact, we do some feature detection. If you open up connectdev or connect.fmbetterforms.com, up on your desktop computer, it will show a different screen for the install than it does on your mobile device. And the way we check for that, it's pretty simple. We basically just do in one of the actions here. And I think it's on, let's see, there's a conditional, let's see, it's on the install screen. In this install screen, we say, where is it? Here, right here. So we basically show one element or show another element. There's a visible calculation, and we say if it's an Android, an iPhone, or an iPad, then we show this one, and if it's not one, and we show the other one. So that's all we're doing, is we're toggling between those two. So you could do sort of something like that and detect. You can also use that for detecting the types of browsers and everything as well, right? What is the name of the app? I cannot find it on my phone. Okay, but posted transaction lock. DA asked, transaction lock, not used much, is a good new feature to roll back. Yeah. One of those things, I think, like, so you can do these, more transaction controlling. You can more explicitly control or programmatically control transactions. And I think there's some good presentations. I think Vince, does one. If I remember correct, he had one somewhere. I thought I saw, and you can do some good transaction stuff there too. But you have to look at the use case. In our case, in this particular aspect, no two users are using the same piece of data, so there's no sense in coding it in. But it totally makes sense for some kind of app that maybe they do some kind of locking, or you need that where the multiple users are writing to the same data. Your phone is Android, didn't find the shortcut. There's two options. I think we might be hiding the instructions right now, but there's two options. Either the ... at the top, and it says add to home page, or it says, depending on the operating system version, add to install app is the other option. All right. How does it know when it changed? Well, how does it know it changed? So Agnes asked, how does it know what changed? Basically taking advantage of the on window transaction, and that sends a message out through a messaging API, and that's all in the docs on that, on how to use messaging API. There's also an example in the examples on a real-time progress bar that uses the same API. On iOS, you can share the link. If you scroll down, it'll give you the option to save it. Yes, correct. Sorry. Would you ever have a race condition error checking for it failing? I think you're talking about the messaging, and we didn't bother to code that in. This is an interesting one. So it's like, how do you keep this? Syncing is really challenging, right? In general, it's really, really complex subject. How do you keep the mobile app? How does it know without flashing all of the data that your current data is accurate? Or if you send, you could say, okay, well, maybe there's a checksum. You get a checksum of the whole piece of data, and you say to the server, is based on this data, is a checksum correct? And the server says, yeah, no, it's not, or it is, and it sends the real data. That's one way, but that's not good enough, because if you're still getting the deltas, these updates from the back end, this is kind of a deep question here. If you're getting these back end updates from the server, what happens if you miss one? You go through the tunnel and you miss one, right? And these updates are maybe changing something, or they're in a feed, and then now suddenly my feed is wrong by one because I missed that update, right? And I don't want to refresh the whole feed. One of the tricks you could do is, with the updates, you send an increment number, and you say, this is increment, or this is update 1, update 2, update 3, update 4, so that the number just increments. Your app says, I just got increment 5. If I didn't get 6 and I got 7, that means I must have missed something. So let me fetch that data. And it says, hey, I'm missing 7. And then the server says, okay, here's 7, or here's all the data to bring you up to speed. So that's kind of a gist. That's one way of handling that technique. And it's kind of like a checksum sort of thing for error trapping there. My feed didn't refresh. The feed doesn't currently refresh right now in the app. We'll probably change that over the next week or so as we finish it up. Again, this app is just literally, it's 9 days old. This is what I need for a client. Where does the data go if there's not a field to capture the data in the dynamic submit? Okay, so this is a good one. The data gets stored. This was Beverly asked this. Where does the data get stored if we didn't have a field? The data is right now, we're just sticking that data in a, here, let me make these a little taller here. I think this can. That's the most layout I've done in FileMaker in a long time. Kind of miss it in the way. So here's an example of the data. Here's 2 pieces of data. So it's stored as a JSON object. So however you want to parse it. I think what I would do is, if I was building this out as some kind of a dynamic checklisty type app where I have different types of widgets and they have to be processed different. I think what I would do is I would have a handler on the submit button that would look for the exceptions. Most of the data just gets filed, but maybe I have a special one called email report, and I go in email report and I click the button. That has a whole bunch of processes have to happen in the background. So I'd probably have a script that says, if it type is email report, then do this, and it runs off to the individual coding, because those have to be hard coded. You can't make those dynamic, I don't think, really. Where's Alessandro? We mentioned that where we store file. Andrew mentioned he stores it in S3. AppSync is a trademark, but it's okay because AWS owns that trademark, and we've decided that we're not going to sue them for the use of AppSync. Right? We didn't actually check if it was used as a trademark, and we don't do that in it anyway. Wasabi is compatible, from my understanding, with S3, so it's basically, I think there's a difference. Eduardo could probably chime in there on the differences with Wasabi, but I think there's a bit of a difference in the way you sign the URLs or something.
Yeah, well, the difference would be more like, of course, where you're heating, but I think it's more if you're using some sort of SDK, because then, of course, you need to use a different one. But if you're just hitting and building the get sign drawer and all that, it's just pretty much just what URL you're using. That would be the difference.
Right. Okay. So for all intents, it's relatively easy code change, I guess. I think that covers all of the techniques. Let's just have a quick look here. I think that covers all of the techniques that we were going to run through today. Oh, two other ones, two more kind of neat techniques. Okay. The next one of the things we did, and you can use this in your apps and you can use it in any app really, in FileMaker too, if you wanted to do some almost. So we have this navigational footer here, right? And we only want to code that once. But when I go to this third tab, the home tab, the footer disappears, right? And if I go back, the footer is there, but if I go forward again, the footer's gone. So the way we created the footer is we went into styling and we added the footer as a slot. And here it is, form footer as a slot. There's descriptions of what all these slots do in the docs, and my has a feature. This is some new feature that's coming out. So you can ignore that. And what we did is here's the footer here, right? The code for the footer. We hand coded it because it's unique. And it says something, if model.showNav, right in here. This is the takeaway here. If model.showNav, so that's a Boolean. And if that evaluates to true, then it'll show everything that's inside here. If it evaluates to false, it won't. So it's showNav, but it's looking at the model key. Remember, model is the data that is in this page. So this particular page has showNav set to false, and this page has showNav set to true. And if we look at the actual page, we go to our home page here, and we look in the data model. There we have showNav is false. If I was to set this to true and hit save, and I go back to here, let me see, did I change that in the right spot? There. When I now it'll show for all three tabs. So this is kind of a neat way of programmatically hiding and showing really common elements in an app. Christina did some kind of cool stuff. She's taken that to a couple of next levels. In the app in here, we have this area right here. And I think, yeah, just this one here, I think this hides and shows, and same as this sidebar hides and shows depending on certain types of pages as well. So it does kind of the same sort of idea. So that's something that's interesting. The last thing is the PWA stuff. And I didn't really talk about how that works. And it's pretty simple to configure. This will be available in every BetterForms app. You can already do almost all of this stuff right now, but there's just the only difference is the custom icons and the icon here that indicates that it's ready to be downloaded or it can be installed. So the way that works is we have in our global actions, we have an on app load, and I'm just going to do this for now. And in here, there's just a bit of a configuration. It says let manifest equal, and this is your PWA manifest. This is, you can find tons of information all over the net on this. And it has a few different things, short name, a long name, and these are used in various implementations and various devices. Background theme color, ours is white, but you can change that color. So when the app launches, it shows in the little notch area, different colors and things like that. And you can put an array of icons. Now, it turns out that Apple really sucks for PWA pickiness, because Apple's super anal about having precise resolutions for screens and icons and everything. They would like you to have a separate PWA image for every screen size there is. So that's maybe 30 different screen sizes. And that's super not practical. It's a real pain to generate those. There's some sites online that can do that and everything, but then you have to host them all. So what we did is we used a another tool that what it does is it actually reads this information and it generates one that's precisely the right size for the device. And normally this is available in a it's normally available with just, let me just show you here just a second here. It's normally you just use a one line of code here. You just use this one line of code and that's it. And that does it. So it's really easy add. I'm changing that source code because I wanted to do a few other things, like be able to show more fancier dynamic splash images. So I was playing around with it here, but that's kind of the code underneath the hood. But you don't have to use that. You could just use this one reference here, and that'll load it up just fine. And that is pretty much it for implementing a progressive web app. There's a lot more things, the capabilities that can be done. There's some new actions in there. We're not using them in this app, but if you had a Chrome device or an Android device, you can have it automatically pop up on the screen like a modal or an action that says, I've noticed you've been using this app for a better experience, install it and so on. All right. We're going to jump to our draw here because I think, and if we have any questions, by all means, just post them in, but we're going to run tight on time here. We'll continue to hang out afterwards. Please do. And I'd love to hear your feedback on everything. And Andrew, do you have the drop by any chance? I can pull it up too.
I can give that link and I think you put in.
Actually, you know what? I do have it. I don't. Yeah, let me just grab that here quick. And share my screen. Right. The way this draw works is if you're here, you're here. And if you're not, oh, sorry, Charlie. Okay, I think these are the correct names. This is this week. There we go. We should build this into the app and then have some kind of a challenge in there. Robert Jackson, is he here?
Does not look like it.
Okay, we'll go again. Volker, I thought I saw him come in. Is he here? Negative. Negative. Is this guy like a three? You're on. He's like a three-time. I know his stuff just went out today.
Oh, I know.
He's like a three-time winner. This guy. We'll throw some extra stuff. I'm gonna do one more, but we're gonna.
One more.
I'm gonna throw a couple extra things in.
No,
well, actually, it went out
worry.
today. I think Madeleine sent it today. So
Yes, no worries.
that's funny. It's such a pain to deal with this swag stuff. It's not. It's like in terms of the logistics and getting it shipped because it's international and everything. It's really, really surprisingly challenging. Santano, negative. Eventually, Giancarlo's looking up there. He's thinking, "Oh, when am I going to win?" Alessandro, he's here.
Oh, Paul.
Oh, was it Paul? Oh, it's Paul. Okay, Paul just went. I'm going to give somebody else. His stuff just went out as well today in the last batch, and he's
never for me. Never ever.
No, well,
Don't
you got to
worry.
keep coming, buddy. You got to keep coming. We've got it rigged anyway. So, I think Doug was one before here. Doug, are you here? Once?
I don't think so.
No, he was. I thought he did come in. Okay, let's try again.
Keep
It's
on going.
I
surprising.
can keep it. I can keep it.
No worries, right? Russell's not here, I don't think. Really brutal. This is one of those things that, what is it? The birthday paradox? Like how many people to have the same birthday in the same room? How many people do you need? Chris?
You should remove the names of people who aren't here first.
Well, the thing is, it's like, no, they could come in, right? So
That's
it's, But this is one of those things that. There we go, Stuart. He left too. No, yeah, he's here.
I'm here. I'm
All
here.
right, congratulations, Stuart. Finally.
Yay.
All right, awesome.
But 2 times over me, 2 times.
2 times went over you.
Yeah, Charles, you can drop it off if you're ever driving south.
Yes,
You know,
there you go. That'll be easier actually.
For me, there is a glitch over there. There is a glitch.
All right, I'm just gonna finish our recording here, guys. Thank you very much for coming out. I'd love to hear if you could kick around. We'd love to hear your feedback and on the app and what we could do to maybe hopefully get more engagement and so on. So thanks again. Let's see, next month we don't have any guests lined up, but if you have some ideas or some topics, let us know and we'll go from there. See you then.